Hi, Fabian. We are streaming publicly.
Awesome. GitLab and I, Marin, the embodiment of GitLab. We were just discussing iteration and um, shipping really small MVCs. Sometimes that can be a bit painful, and I started saying like, oh, we should record a session about it, so we're doing it now. So what I meant to say is, for me, there's a huge difference in iterating and creating an MVC and shipping something that actually doesn't comply with our definition of done, our quality standards, and may just be broken or dangerous in some dimensions. And I think sometimes what can happen is people say like, oh, we'll iterate, but what they actually mean is, let's not test it and ship it. And I don't think that is what we are looking for. I think when we create an iteration or a minimal viable change, the important bit here is viable. And viable for some features means that it's not going to delete some data for some customers because we chose not to test it correctly. I think that's sometimes a little bit of or I can feel tension, right? Because iteration implies being fast. And I think that's true. But it doesn't mean we want to compromise on those dimensions. At least I don't, because I think this is not a service to our customers. In the end, if we release an MVC and then people try it out and they have a bad experience because it's buggy, we've not tested it thoroughly, and then ultimately, they can't use it, or they try using it and we run into issues. And I think that's what I wanted to briefly highlight, and that's going to be very important for the work that we do on dedicated and essentially anywhere.
Actually, the whole platform's set of teams as well. I also want to highlight another thing that you mentioned here. People use interchangeably MVC and iteration, and there is a way to also iterate towards an MVC. So that gets lost very frequently. And you mentioned here some of the events that could cause customer harm, right? Like data loss and so on. But there are situations where you can actually split the MVC tasks into such small steps of iteration that they continuously provide value. And I think it's always about the balance, right? Like we need to know what the outcome is that we want to achieve and what the risks are. And sometimes it's absolutely okay to merge things that are not fitting fully in a complete picture of that MVC, as long as they're also safe to do, and as long as they fit into the direction you're taking towards an MVC. So, I don't know, for example, if you merge something that just doesn't do anything, that also might be okay if, the next immediate step is making it work. And I think that this is like one of the messages I was sending yesterday when we were talking about some of the new dedicated features. It is okay to actually get an item merged once we are absolutely certain that it's safe, because it could cause data incident with a customer. And the next set of steps will be to make that feature fully usable and usable by our customers and production ready. So Fabian, I see that you pulled up the page. Go for it.
Yes. No, I think I just remembered that in the handbook, we actually have 12 things that are not iteration. And the first one here is reducing quality. The third one is compromising on security. Actually, maybe I'll raise a small MR, because we could easily add dimensions here that are important for incidents, about data loss, for example. We can't compromise on a few things, and it's important to remember that when we try to move fast. There's also something here, an excuse to impose unrealistically tight timelines. That's also not iteration. And so keep that in mind. I think iteration can be used, to further some of those goals. That is not what we're looking for, and we have to keep ourselves accountable for that, because ultimately, iteration is a means to an end, and the end is customer results. And that is where you want to go. And I think as a product manager, this is also important to me. I've said that before. We need to know where we want to be. And then we can iterate towards that goal in very small increments. But if we don't know where we want to go, then you can iterate in 15 different directions and not actually arrive somewhere. And so that can also be hard.
Yeah, and just like final note on that, that doesn't also mean that the goal can't change. That's the whole point of this iteration, right? Like it's just the direction that we are going into. And if we are getting to a point where we realize the goal doesn't really match the reality, you change the goal and you continue moving that way. So there's also, I think on the iteration page, there is this like nice image that actually describes that. And I think that is really important to say. So in our teams, we use things like blueprints to actually give us direction, but those blueprints are not set in stone. That doesn't mean we're going to implement everything. It does mean that we want to consider all of these items. And as we implement things, as we go towards that goal, we might be changing that post, and that's absolutely okay.
I agree with that. And so for anyone who's listening or viewing this, I think it's important that when you feel that iteration is used in a way that is actually not aligned with our value, it's important to speak up, highlight that is happening, and make sure that we we do the right thing, because ultimately nobody is helped if we compromise on those things.
Excellent.